Hello everybody and welcome back to another Marvel Crisis Protocol Characters Spotlight, and today we are taking a look at Shadowland Daredevil. Nothing to do with a recently coming out show that has me very excited about the character in general. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into things here. Starting out, he is a 4 threat coming in with a 4-3-3-6 stamina defensive line. He's a size 2 and a medium mover. He's going to be coming in on a small base, and of course very important to acknowledge is he's coming in with the hand ninjas here. So we'll take a look at them real quick before we move into the rest of his stat card. These guys have 2 stamina. They are medium movers. They're going to be on a medium base. They're size 2 with 1-1-2 defensive stats, so definitely on the squishier side. They're going to die very quickly. They have their ninja weapons attack here. This is a range 2 4-dice attack. It's got a double wild bleed trigger. Not the most consistent thing in the world, but I mean, hey, it's some extra damage if you can get that through. They've got the Ninja Vanish superpower here. It's a 0-cost active that says move 1 asset or civilian token being held by this character to another allied character within range 3. Do note that this is going to take you an action. The allied character is now holding that token. A character can hold more tokens than allowed by the crisis, and then this character is KO'd, so they get to knock themselves out to basically pass their objectives to your other characters. Really useful in the right situation. But it is going to take an action to do, so you can't like double move to go grab like a middle point and then pass it away. You're going to have to kind of keep that in mind with these guys. They also have the Ninja Ambush ability. When they're placed onto the battlefield as a result of Coordinated Strike or Ancient Throwing Blade special rules, they may immediately make an attack. So that's 2 of the different ways they can be spawned in, and they get to immediately attack when they do so, which is nice. It means they get to kind of attack a little bit more frequently, even if they're starting off the board. With a lot of grunts, if they're down, you don't really get to attack with them on the turn you spawn them in necessarily. So with these guys, it kind of works out because they're going to be dropping themselves off the board with Ninja Vanish, but they're still going to get to make some of those attacks they would have gotten to make otherwise when you spawn them in. Of course, being range 2 grunts, they're not going to be quite as consistent for that as some of the other ones are, just having a little bit further range, but still free attacks are good. Lastly, they have the hand. They cannot contest secure objective tokens, and they do not have to pay power when interacting with civilian or asset tokens. So they can pick up tokens, no problem, but they can't contest the secure points, and they can't interact with pay-to-flips and things like that either. And they are the grunts for Elektra and Shadowland Daredevil. They are shared by both units, so obviously there's some kind of interesting synergy and almost anti-synergy between the 2 of them for that. So that'll be something to mention when we talk about models that you can pair Shadowland with here. So, continuing with the stat card for Shadowland himself, we have 3 different attacks on the profile here. The first one is Coordinated Strike. This is a range 2 5-cost physical attack. After this attack is resolved, this character is going to gain power based on the damage dealt, your standard builder text here. And after the attack is resolved, if there is not an allied hand ninja character in play, place it in play within range 1 of this character with an activated token. It's now part of your squad. And as we previously saw, when you place the ninjas in with this attack, they're going to immediately get to make an attack. So this is kind of like a 5-dicer followed up immediately by a 4-dicer, but then of course, if you're double tapping with it, the ninjas will already be in play, so you won't be able to get that extra 4-dicer both times, but still, it means with 0 power, Daredevil can effectively throw out 5 dice, a 4-dice, and then another 5-dicer with just these Coordinated Strike attacks. Next he has his Baton Snare. This works a little bit differently from regular Daredevil's version, where he's pulling targets towards him. This one, rather, he's coming towards them. It's a range 4 4-dice physical attack, also going to cost him 0. It ignores line of sight, and the defending character doesn't benefit from cover, so it can be pretty nice on scoundrels or just cover heavy boards. And it's got that Pursuit, which is automatic. Before damage is dealt, you may advance small towards the target character. This is really nice just for when you want to get that extra movement, or like maybe you needed to move anyways, but you might as well try and throw out some extra damage with it while you're at it. The Pursuit being guaranteed definitely makes it kind of one of those things of like, if all you need is a small move, there's no reason not to use this. So yeah, it's certainly nice for that. And of course, ignoring line of sight and cover can be really nice in certain situations. So even though it's only a 4-dicer and it's not gaining you any power, it's still really nice kind of utility attack to have on his card. Next, we move on to a spender, which is Demon's Devastation. This is a 3-cost, range 2, 7 dice physical attack. You'll note that all of his attacks so far have been physical. If an allied hand ninja's character is within range 2 of the target character, add 2 dice to the attack roll. So if you got your ninjas in play, this is a 9 dice attack. Always nice when you can just kind of do like a coordinated strike, place the ninjas in, get that 4 dicer, and then immediately follow up with a 9 dice Demon's Devastation. And then you've got the Wild Vanish. After the attack is resolved, place this character within range 2. Definitely a nice little thing to have. You get a little bit of mobility off of this attack as well. It is only on a wild, which means, adding those 2 extra dice definitely helps your consistency with that. But, yeah, being able to kind of make this spender and then, like, place yourself onto a point or something like that. This character has a surprising amount of mobility based off of his attacks, which is just kind of nice to have. So, especially considering he doesn't really have much mobility in the rest of his kit, being able to kind of get it through the attacks is still really, really nice. We're going to skip over the leadership briefly, we'll come back to it, but for now we're going to look at the things that he has all the time, which, starting out, we have Radar Sense. When defending against physical or energy attacks, this character adds blanks in its defense roll to its total successes. This is all physical or energy attacks, so you're going to have kind of you're not going to care about the ranges too much for this. Of course, it's only going to be within range 3 anyways, because he does have stealth, so character's going to have to be within range 3 to target him. So yeah, I mean, as long as you're not fighting against mystic heavy teams, his defenses are going to be pretty solid. I mean, it's 4 and 3 dice counting blanks. Those are good. They're not, the most reliable thing in the world, but counting blanks, that is better than attack dice. So, for example, a 4 or 5 dice attack has a very good chance just not to do damage to him, especially on the physical side. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty solid. Now, the one thing, of course, you are going to have to watch out for is Mystic is a huge weak side for him. He has no other defensive tech beyond this, so if they're hitting him on the Mystic side, he's really not having a good time. Last thing on his card here is Wall Crawler, so he's not really impaired by buildings and things like that. He has no problem getting around those. But yeah, I mean, that's nice to have, but doesn't really matter too much for him, especially since he's got stuff like the Wild Vanish to kind of get around that if he needs to in certain situations anyways. So yeah, I mean, it's nice to have, but it's not like the biggest thing in the world for him. The really nice thing with it is with Baton Snare, because you're ignoring line of sight, the advanced small towards the target can be used to get you over a building where you previously were on the other side of it or something like that. So there's some kind of cool play with that, but yeah, nothing too crazy. Taking a look at the flip side real quickly here, the first thing we're going to notice is he goes up to 7 stamina, and his defensive stats flip a little bit. His physical is down to 3, counting blanks still, and his mystic goes up to 4. So he's going to be a little bit more mystically defensive on this side, a little bit less physically defensive, but because he counts blanks, that still feels all right. And, having a little bit extra stamina is also certainly a good thing. Another couple things that change. First of all, Demon's Devastation is now a mystic attack, but it no longer has that vanish trigger, so it's no longer going to be placing you after the attack is resolved if you roll a wild. But if you have the ninjas within range 2 of the target, you're still going to be going up to 9 dice, so that definitely still feels good. Just doesn't have quite the versatility that I had before with the range 2 place after the attack, but also hitting on Mystic, which is generally a better side. Most characters' defensive tech works more against physical than it does against Mystic, although it's not always the case. In this case, it kind of makes him really good into himself, I guess, on the flip side. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a better side in most cases to be attacking on. The other thing that changes on this side is that he gains this superpower, There Is Only the Beast. This is an active superpower that's going to be a 3 cost. The next time the Demon's Devastation attack is used this activation, its range becomes Area 2. Area 2 definitely makes Demon's Devastation a very scary attack. It can be potentially a 9 dice Mystic area attack. Because the ninjas have to be within range 2 of the target character, you're going to have to somewhat keep that in mind when figuring out how you're doing this attack. You might be able to get some in the range 2 of the hand ninjas, but not all of them. So kind of something to keep in mind there, but either way, turning it into an area attack for an extra 3 cost is definitely solid. I mean, a 6 cost, effectively 9 or 7 dice area attack in the right situation can be really good. Definitely on the pricier side, but still not even close to the unusably pricey. And in the right situation, it's going to do a lot for you. And he really doesn't have anything else to spend his power on, so he can afford to do this all day long. Flipping back to his front side, we're going to take a look at his leadership now, which is Shadow War for the affiliation Criminal Syndicate. When an allied character attacks an enemy character holding or contesting an objective, it may reroll one of its attack dice. This leadership can reroll skull results. Personally, I really, really like this leadership. This leadership is fantastic for just kind of a general attrition game plan. You're already most of the time wanting to target characters holding or contesting objectives anyways, because they're the ones that are winning your opponent the game. So if you're going for a more attrition-y game plan, it just kind of makes sense. And it's not once per turn, and you don't have to pay for it. It's fantastic. It's like all the things that I love out of reroll abilities. So yeah, this is probably one of my favorite reroll leaderships just in the game in general, and I really don't play it enough because it's just very consistent, and it can even reroll skulls, so it works really well, especially if you have characters that are stacking rerolls. You can kind of be like, oh, well, this was a pretty good roll, but I got a skull in there. I'm going to reroll that skull first using the leadership, and even if it fails, I have other rerolls that I can then put on top of it. So, yeah, no, really, really nice leadership in my opinion. Probably my favorite Criminal Syndicate leadership in terms of just like being fun to play, but that's just because I get to play a more attrition game plan, and sometimes that's very fun. But yeah, very generic leadership. Anyone who's looking for a little bit of attack consistency, and Daredevil definitely appreciates it. I mean, he's got that vanish trigger that's going to help him get, but just in general, he doesn't really have access to much in the way of rerolls. Works great for the ninjas as well. 4 dice with a reroll feels a lot better than just flat 4 dice, and helps you get their bleed trigger as well. So I suppose that's something it can kind of do for you too. With that all out of the way, we're going to take a look at tactics cards, where he has access to one tactics card here, which is the Shuriken Arashi attack here. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. It's an unaffiliated active card. During Shadowland Daredevil's activation, he may spend 2 power to play this card. If there's an allied hand ninja's character within range 2 of Shadowland, he may use the attack shown above once this activation. So he's still going to have to use an action to actually make the attack. Range, cover, and line of sight are measured from hand ninjas instead of Daredevil. So right out of the gate, you kind of have a neat thing of just like if the opposing character is around a corner, or maybe they would have cover from Daredevil, but not the ninjas, kind of lets you get around that. So next we have the attack itself. This is a range 3 10 dice physical attack. Before creating the dice pool for the attack, the target character may advance small. Then, if the target character is benefiting from cover from this attack rolls 5 fewer dice. After the attack is resolved, remove all allied hand ninjas from the battlefield. So it's kind of interesting. Basically, if your opposing character is in a situation where they have no terrain near them that they can cower behind, this is a 10 dice attack for 2 cost, which is incredibly good. However, if they have access to any form of cover whatsoever, and they can short advance to get within that from your ninjas, which are also a medium base, which makes it a little bit easier to get cover on them. Or is that how that works? Maybe it's only how that works defensively. I'm trying to think of... Yeah, no, I think that is how that works. Because it's any point of the model to any point of the model is obstructed? No, that's not how that works at all. I'm just dumb. It's fine. No, so the medium base in the ninjas has almost nothing to do with that. But still, if they can get to cover, it becomes only a 5 dice attack for 2, which doesn't feel all that good. So... not that great in that case, but if you're playing on a more sparse table, which I mean most of the time you'll already know that when you're picking your tactics cards, this definitely feels really good. Or if you're just playing a lot of throws and you have a lot of ways of getting terrain out of the way, that's also going to feel really good. Next, we move on to affiliations, where he only is a member of the one he is a leader for, and I do really like him as a leader here. If you're trying to play a more attrition-focused Criminal Syndicate, he's primarily competing with MODOK for that, where MODOK can kind of play a kind of mid-rangey or attrition-y one if he would choose, where basically if you have a wild, you can change one of your other results to a hit or shield. MODOKs is certainly a good leadership as well, and I mean, Daredevil also kind of appreciates MODOKs. They can work fairly well under each other's. Personally, I prefer Shadowlands just because it's not once per turn and doesn't require you to roll a wild, so that is certainly nice, but there's kind of pros and cons to both, and they feel relatively similar in terms of power level. So yeah, I mean, if you're going for a more attrition-y game plan, I think you can get away with either just fine, and I think running either model under the other is also probably just fine. As far as other leaderships are concerned, you do have access to Kingpin here, which is a very objective-focused leadership, and Shadowland Daredevil definitely works out reasonably well for this as well. He's fairly bulky, but he also just has access to the ninjas, which are great for objective play, and yeah, I mean, that just works pretty well for him. So Shadowland under Kingpin definitely works. Going the other way, unfortunately, Kingpin isn't exactly the most attrition-y piece in the world, so it doesn't get all that much out of Shadowland's leadership, but yeah, definitely works reasonably well under Kingpin. The last leadership we have here is Claws, which is a very selfish leadership. When an ally character is dazed or KO'd after the effect is resolved, Claw gets to advance. And while this doesn't do anything for Daredevil, Claw definitely still appreciates bringing characters with grunts because they are allied characters and they get dazed or KO'd all the time. As a matter of fact, they can KO themselves to give objectives to people and then allow Claw to advance around, which is definitely an interesting synergy. So, I mean, if you're running Claw leadership, if you're trying to play around with that, then Shadowland Daredevil is definitely a worthy inclusion for him. While on the topic of Criminal Syndicate, of course, we have tons of models that will benefit from the reroll. Stuff like Killmonger absolutely loves it, where he's already, trying to stack out rerolls and things like that. So ignoring or being able to reroll those skulls certainly is appreciated for him. You can also count shields instead of hits, so you can kind of play with that as well for the rerolls. So stuff like Killmonger definitely works well if you're just trying to play a more attrition-y team. Hood works great. He's got those 4 dice rapid fire attacks, so you're able to make those theoretically 4 times in a turn, and having a reroll on all 4 of those feels really good. Definitely one of the places where it's kind of clear Shadowland over MODOK, because MODOK's only being once per turn, whereas Hood's going to benefit 4 times from it. And I think that's kind of the big thing you're looking for, is characters that are consistently going to be able to use that leadership multiple times or to really big effect are going to really benefit from it. So again, Hood's probably one of the most standouts for it, but really anyone with rapid fire is a solid splash under Shadowland. I even think of something like Domino or something like that could be kind of absurd there. So yeah, just things to kind of consider. And then of course you also have access to Elektra, the other character who can who can bring the hand ninjas into play with the ancient throwing blades there, which works very, very similarly to Shadowland's ability as well. And it's kind of an interesting synergy and anti-synergy thing, because on one hand, both of these characters are costed with the grunts in mind, so only having one set of grunts kind of takes away from their 4 threat kind of being shared. It's almost like they're both 3.5 threat sort of deal. But on the other hand, because the ninjas typically don't stay in play for very long, their kind of intention is to pop and then be spawned back in by Elektra or Daredevil on their turns, it kind of works out because you're going to lose the grunt and then you're going to want to bring them back anyways, so it's not really, you're not losing as much as you would be, but it's definitely a little bit awkward sometimes. So yeah, it's kind of a cool thing that they can do together, but whether or not it's actually good kind of remains to be seen. Taking a look at other affiliations, I think the big things that you can kind of look for to take advantage of with Shadowland Daredevil, and specifically the fact that he has grunts, is kind of just more consistent reroll things. Shadowland's going to really appreciate defensive rerolls, particularly because he's counting those blanks, so could be a really interesting splash somewhere like a Web Warriors or Invader's Shield or something like that. If you want to focus on specifically Shadowland being more consistent, you could look at something like Invincible Iron Man Shield or Black Panther Wakanda, where you're going to have access to some of those rerolls from that. As we've already kind of established, he doesn't really mind spending power on things because he doesn't have that much power to spend off of himself unless he's throwing out spenders all the time, which, I mean, that's kind of a dream world for him. So yeah, definitely something he can kind of take advantage of is those ones where you do have to pay a power to reroll. He doesn't really mind doing that at all. Biggest problem with those ones, of course, being that the grunts don't benefit from it, which is where I kind of lean back towards his own leadership as being one of the best places for his grunts. They really get a lot of value out of that. So definitely kind of an interesting spot for him to be in. Other places that could be kind of interesting for him are places where you can help out his mobility a little bit, especially since he doesn't mind spending the power on something like Bump if you want to try him out in Midnight Suns. Could be kind of interesting there. You also have access to some interesting ones like New Mutants, being able to just kind of teleport him up into the fight. One of his biggest problems is that a lot of the times, unless your opponent left someone in range 2 of him, he's going to be walking if he wants to do anything, or at the very least he's going to have to start out with his baton throw with that automatic pursuit. So being able to just kind of say, no, he's in your face, he's going to do what he wants to do, is definitely something he likes being able to do. So yeah, New Mutants and Midnight Suns are probably 2 of the places I would be interested to see him splashed. But yeah, overall, I think Shadowland Daredevil is a really, really interesting piece. I think his grunts are kind of cool in the way that they work a little differently from the other grunts, where most of the other grunts, you want to try and keep them alive, not necessarily because they're valuable alive, but because they're going to be doing their most output while they're alive, and if your opponent's wasting attacks on them, you're kind of not complaining about that because they're just grunts, so they are a smaller portion of your your damage pool, whereas with Shadowland, you're very okay with your grunts just kind of being gone because you're going to spawn them in and they're still going to get to do their thing, which being only range 2, they probably weren't making more than one attack all that consistently anyways. So his grunts are definitely on the more unique side, and I think it makes him really, really interesting, especially when you pair him with something like Electra, where all of a sudden you have two ways of spawning these grunts in that you don't even really care about keeping on the table. So you can kind of just go back and forth between the two, and it becomes really, really interesting how that can work. So yeah, I think there's definitely some really interesting play patterns with Shadowland there. And in terms of splashing him, I think as long as you're kind of paying attention to the things that he's looking for, stuff like rerolls, specifically consistent rerolls, things that his grunts can take advantage of course, is bonus. Defensive rerolls also just being really nice. Anytime you're counting blanks, having access to that is really nice, and it's going to give him a little bit better on the Mystic side as well. So if you're thinking about splashing him, I definitely see him working well as a kind of splashed, more objective focused piece, whereas if you're running under his leadership, you're kind of playing a more attrition-y game there, which I think is kind of neat that he can kind of flip between those two playstyles relatively effectively. But yeah, that's basically going to do it on my thoughts for Mr. Murdoch here. Definitely let me know what you guys think down below. Are there any synergies or combos that I didn't think of here that you guys really, really like with Mr. Daredevil? Any affiliations you guys have seen a lot of success with splashing him? Always curious to hear what you guys think, and definitely a model that I want to find more reasons to put on the table. So if you guys have some cool places to splash them, definitely let me know down below. But that is going to do it for this character spotlight. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Helps me out a bunch. Lets me know you guys are enjoying the stuff we are throwing out here. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for this one. So until next time, have a great day, everybody. Peace.